Okay, you're ready to go.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is a meeting of the city's capital committee. Today is March 23rd, 2026. Thank you all for joining. It's been a while since we've met, and I wanted to go over it and just bring you up to date on some things. If you recall from our meeting, and I believe in the early February, we had a preliminary review of the outlook for the capital budget for next year and talked a bit about the projects, potential projects, our critical needs, our inventory that Rich went over. And then we sort of went on a hiatus uh, pending reviews from the Citizens Advisory Committee. So we had a number of weeks of meetings with the Citizens Advisory Committee, and they received some presentations for the various departments. And then we also got their input at the end of a survey. So with a survey at the end of the process. So what I'd like to do here today is just present the results of that survey, and then we can get into any updates we have for our outlook. And then Rich has got some recommendations he'd like to discuss, and we can get into that. And then we'll just take it from there and see where we go. So let me share, let me pull up survey results and start sharing my screen here. Okay. Can everyone see that? Did it come up?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. All right. So as I mentioned, we met over most of the month of February, once a week, and then we also had a first week in March, and we had presentations from all the key categories of needs, starting with, I believe, parks and courts and streets and fire department, and then building and fleet and all of that. So uh, let me just summarize what our results were from the Citizens Advisory Committee. We had a fairly good representation across the city. Now, again, not everyone participates and not everyone appoints some members, but we did have a total of 15 responses. Actually, the number of participants was about 22, 23. So we got the majority. That's a little up from last year. But it's distributed geographically through the city. And our survey responses by critical type, project type. What we do is on a scale of 1 to 10, we with 10 being the greatest import and 1 being the less. What categories grabbed most of the participants as terms of key critical areas, and city vehicles being non-fire police were one of the higher areas, and corrections and other public safety. That includes the PSAP. And you'll see when you get into some of the results, City Hall, we also had a long discussion about City Hall and the needs for city building, particularly with the roof repairs. Bridges, particularly when you have a matching fund, they are very keen on the fact that getting the bigger bang for the buck, and if there's money out there, you can grab that with federal monies. And along you go. Fire department is always rated highly, and then and it goes down from there. Some of the top 10 projects by rating, as I mentioned, City Hall roof repairs. We talked about that a bit, and some people rated that highly when they got the survey. Fire department again had a couple of projects that were rated highly, as they typically do. Some of the hazardous street removal on street trees was also a big discussion. And then again, the bridge project, particularly the Compton Bridge, that Rich can go into detail a lot. It's been a multi-year project, and it also involves a lot of federal funds. It's a major project here. And then South Refuge Station, we talked a bit, and that also got rated highly on the results. And then with the court's presentation, we talked about that as well. But this one, actually, the old municipal court building, talking about securing windows and doors was rated highly, as well as refuse division vehicles. It's funny because we talk about vehicles, we break out that category, refuse and everything else, and refuse usually gets a good response in terms of the need for making sure that part of the fleet is up to date. Those are the top 10. And then on the bottom 10, I always include this just sort of as an FYI, the Christie Cycle Boulevard track and pedestrian improvements, some water service to Circuit Court building, some of the Carnahan replacing supply and waste piping. I think that was presented in the courts there is not as critical as some of the other things that we were talking about in terms of like facade replacement and such. So that's probably why it was rated less important than others. The Wi-Fi upgrade as well. Some of the bike facility improvements, which I think we're going to accommodate a portion of. Fallon Park, the parking lot repairs, some of the AC handling unit at the Academy, and then the Lyle House. There was a big discussion on the Lyle House. Alderwoman Schweitzer, you'd be interested in that. There was a big discussion about how much it would cost and what the utilization of that. That did not rate highly in the survey. And then following that, there were a number of items that they simply just said we need more information on. Some of the electrical gear at 1520 Market, and then some of the other, these are sort of inside technical type of repairs that require a lot of explanation. And so at least 2 or 3 responses of them said, hey, we need more information on these items. And so those are listed there, muni garage roof, gateway transportation, information technology, those type of things. The flood wall repairs, those have already been addressed. We talked about this a little earlier with a supplemental appropriation for capital. Earlier this year, we had a $4.1 million supplemental appropriation, which took care of that. And then pointers of survey respondents, again, as I mentioned, it's pretty well represented across the city. And then some other comments and suggestions. The first one is sort of an interesting one because it's always gotten my attention too. When we talk about replacing comfort stations in the city, you're usually blown away by the cost of various ones. And now I know some of them are have a certain architectural flair to them when they were built at the time. And so you see these hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace comfort stations. So one of the suggestions was standardizing them so they aren't as costly when we need to repair them. And there are other things, upgrading bike paths and promoting STL to young people as an affordable bike-friendly city. Stump removal was an item that came up, and just it wasn't particularly on the critical needs list, but it was an item that came up in discussion about, particularly with the North Side City Parks, and I believe the tornado impact had some impact there on the need to replace or remove stumps throughout the city. There were some comments about thanking for the opportunity to voice opinions on this Citizens Advisory Committee. And I think there was a recognition and going to comment for how difficult it is. I mean, there was sort of awareness of the vast need of capital needs throughout the city and the limited amount of funds that we have to address them. So it's hard to make make recommendations on or prioritizing them. And obviously, there would be more of a general comments about improving the life of city workers and park service improvements like restrooms, and then police and fire department needs and critical building needs such as the civil courts building, sort of prioritizing that one. Just some general comments about the presentations from departments. They were pleased with some of those presentations. I think, and there were comments, positive comments on Jewel Box and such iconic gems as the Soulard Market. Yeah, and number 6, Soulard Market was only rated 0 to 9. That's my fault. Usually in the survey we have a 1 to 10, and that one was cut off for some reason. Just for anyone's benefit, I did take a look at that. It had all the 9s been 10s, it wouldn't have been enough to get us in the top 10, but it would have been high. Soulard Market usually rates pretty highly, and so we've been trying to address some of those needs over the last couple of years. There was a question about the Lyle House. Well, it would be a shame to lose it. $3 million seems like a lot of money, and so that's going to be a big discussion about what to do with that particular challenge for Carondelet Park. And then just some general comment about trying to rate things such that they benefit the majority of most citizens. And I think again, when you have such a vast majority of projects far exceeding the amount of funds we have available, I think the thinking was there, trying to get as much bang for your buck in terms of reaching most citizens as you can with the limited pot that you've got. And those are generally the comments. Again, I thought it was pretty engaging. Most of the meetings actually went long when we went into discussions, and I thought it was a pretty good group to have, and they were definitely interested in what we were discussing. And just in case you're interested, all the projects here, the details of the responses by project are listed also in the survey. So I'll stop there with any questions about that in particular. If not, one thing I was going to do.
I just had one comment.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Not a question, but a comment. I did try and attend. Thank you for inviting us to attend those. I thought I was able to attend a few or parts of them. And one thing I did want to highlight is it wasn't stated explicitly, but in the first one that was on streets, there was the emphasis was on the projects that were recommended by the Community Mobility Committee, that remembering that correctly. And a lot of those were south side. And I felt I heard a little bit of kind of frustration with that, those being the ones that were talked about more versus there was just I think there was one street project that crossed over the north side, but yeah, I heard a little bit of frustration with that and some of the questioning and comments, but just that was the only thing that I appreciated being able to join as well, and I thought members of the committee asked really smart questions, and we're appreciative of the task we have before us in terms of balancing needs and critical needs and even more critical needs.
Right.
So
right.
not even needs and wants, but so.
No, I agree. Yeah, it was very good give and take, I thought too. Well, thank you, Christine. Yeah. All right, before we get to Rich's discussion, Rich had put together some recommendations. I did want to share with you, just sort of refresh your memory about the budget outlook summary, and so I'm going to share that really quickly. I'll enlarge this a bit, see if I can. If you remember, this is what we talked about in February. There has not been any changes in terms of estimated revenues and such. I did want to call attention to a couple things. One, we do have another $1 million in interest earnings from the citywide capital. So this number was 3 and now it's 4. So that's a plus. And also updated that refuse garage debt service. That was paid off in the current fiscal year. So that's an obligation that we don't need to continue. So that fell off. Otherwise, this is basically the same exhibit we had back in early February. And it's a total budget of about $50 million that we're addressing. And some of the 5-year projections here are also attached. And I'll share later what our 5-year projections are on capital, just as an FYI. Obviously, we're still focused on FY27, but it just gives you an idea about what we've benefited from this over the last few years, aside from ARPA, is that we've had surpluses in the last few years. And that's great in terms of providing additional capital, but it's not a recurring source. So over time, particularly if you hit a recession or something, that's going to go away. And so you can't rely on that going forward. And so it's just something to keep in mind when we're going on that. Okay, well, I'll stop sharing on that and then pull up. And then that'll lead me into Rich And I'll pull this up on screen. And so if you wanted to start discussing this, let's see.
So, Paul, did you want to mention anything about the possible second part of a GOB or a lease purchase for anything we don't get?
Yeah, and that's a good segue for you, Rich, because you've got both. Because one of the things we talked about, and just briefly, was that we've got that limited amount of funds in the capital budget. But then we also have the second tranche of general obligation bonds. And this goes back a couple of years when we received from voters the authorization to issue $50 million in general obligation bonds. And we issued something like 21 or for project purpose, $21 million in projects. And it was sort of timed for whenever the levy would be expiring so that we could do so without increasing the tax rate. Well, now we've got the opportunity to do another 23 or $24 million worth of projects this year, and that would be later. In supplementing this limited amount of money in capital we have, just about $50 million, we also have the opportunity to identify another $20+ million worth of projects that don't make that list into the GO. Now, the GO, the general obligation bond issue, that's a little more restrictive in that it needs to be such that the items that you're funding have a maturity such that you can issue bonds and they last as long as the useful life of those projects are lasting as long as you're paying the debt. And so it's like going out and financing a house or a car, and that you don't want to have to replace that item before you're finished paying off the debt. So that's some of the restrictions there. And what Rich has done, and we'll take a look at this exhibit as soon as I can come up with it. Let's see here. I know I've got it here somewhere. There it is. Okay. And it is basically making recommendations for both the capital funding for FY27 and the later the issuance for the general obligation bond. So let me pull that one up. And I'll make this, and I'll make this screen so you can actually read it here. Okay. Okay. So the exhibit you have is on the left, you have the regular capital funding, and on the right, you've got the potential funding for GOB. And what the GOB represents is a lot of those items not funded through the regular capital source funding. So Rich, I'll actually turn it over to you if you want to go through the list. Again, there are just a couple parts of the budget that are, these are pertaining to things that are discretionary. As you know, the capital budget, biggest sources are sales taxes that are allocated by ordinance, both with the citywide and ward accounts, as well as parks, metro parks and things like that, which are allocated by ordinance. But then you have a couple of discretionary items. One, you have the gas tax, which funds projects for roads and bridges. And then you also have those surplus monies, in which we talked about coming into the supplementing the capital budget. So most of what Rich is talking about is going to be discussing are those items where we have discretion on both the gas tax revenues as well as those have surplus monies. So go ahead, Rich. I'll leave it up to you.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Good afternoon, everyone. So as I do every year, after we do Citizen Advisory Committee, and I sit through all those meetings with Paul so I can actually hear and answer questions to the public on all these different items, then look at the surveys and understand where there's an appetite to do things. Other things that are looked at as well, Christina mentioned it with the Complete Streets Advisory Committee, which is by Ordinance 71882 and recommendations from them. And then also another thing that I consider very highly is projects that we have federal grants on. So particularly streets and bridge projects where we applied East West Gateway and we come up with 80% federal funding and we come up with a 20% local match share to build those. So I'll start at the top of the list. So the building repairs and equipment, the BPS building repairs, there's $1 million there. We talk about this every year. This is for all kind of issues that come out throughout the course of the year. Plumbing, electrical, mechanical, roofing, tuck pointing, just about anything under the sun in our many, many buildings across the city that, we have a failure that is not funded in a budget. It's not funded by capital, and we generally have to make immediate repairs in order to keep the lights on, keep the heat on, air conditioning on, and keep the city functioning. And we use this regularly with facilities management and keep these buildings operative. So the $1 million that represents will easily be used throughout the course of the year on those type of discretionary projects.
Hey, Rich, I'm sorry. Ben, you have your hand raised. Did I skip over you?
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Rich is basically addressing what I was interested in understanding as a first-time member of this capital committee, and that is, how do you incorporate this citizen advisory feedback? Is it layered in here, or is it just in your judgment as you hear it? Anyway, I'd be interested to understand how we account for it, and what does the governance require as it pertains to that feedback. Over.
So for me, what I tried to do is look at everything that was on that survey that people commented on, and I tried to pair up what I think the immediate priorities are from listening to the directors, reading the notes that they submitted with the budget, and with the available funding. And then, with this opportunity to have a GOB funding, what you'll see is that everything on that survey is incorporated in one of these three proposed funding sources. The only items that are not included in there were cleaning of HVAC ducts at fire stations, which Paul and I deemed are a maintenance item, which we'll cover through budget, through replacement and upgrade of exhaust and removal systems for fire stations, which my facility staff and I are already working on funding that. And part of that funding will come out of these miscellaneous building repairs that we're talking about. The critical civil courts building new water service, which the courts deemed as being not critical, and they asked us to move that into the needed column. The Carnahan Courthouse replace water supply and piping, which they deemed not critical, and they were actually started on a portion of that under their own funding. The Carnahan Courthouse sound Wi-Fi upgrades, which are included in the courtroom modernization project, and the SLMPD Academy replace the 25-ton AHU unit. Everything else in the St. Louis Police Department communication building partial radio system. And everything else is included in one of these three funding sources. And the reason we also didn't include the police department is because Paul and I discussed this, and as everyone is aware here, that is under a very deep discussion with the mayor and the police board, and of course Paul's involved in that with the budget allocations, and so we didn't feel like we wanted to muddy up the waters by adding yet another funding source to add things to that discussion. Paul kind of directed me to leave that as part of the budgetary discussion and what the police have as far as what their requirement is. But other than that, it's a lot of discussion about all those things I talked about by ordinance, the recommendation of the Capital Committee, Citizen Advisory Committee, by the ordinances, and of course by need and by grants and funding, and then try to pair up and match up everything the best you can. What you'll also see here, Ben, is on a lot of these projects, there are lesser numbers than what were requested in the capital needs inventory. And that is because, we have been working on these projects and giving out smaller allocations and doing them in different tranches over the years, like the pool renovations projects at the rec centers. There have been significant funding in smaller pieces as we go. And quite frankly, it works better in smaller pieces than one large project because we can focus on what actually needs to be done, and knock those off a bit at a time until we get everything up to speed. But it's not an exact cookbook recipe. It takes a lot of time to go through it. And again, these are just my thoughts, and certainly this committee is going to tell me what they think about that.
Okay, thanks for explaining that. I appreciate it, Rich.
Sure, no problem. So the courthouse repairs are on here for $650,000. That is more or less an open item for building repairs. We'll talk about the courts later down the list. And so that number fit in with a couple of the courts projects that we're talking about with the courthouse modernization, as well as the facade repairs to the building. So that is a discretionary fund, but they obviously use it towards all the other items that they requested that I don't have on this list that could be also in the bond issue as well. The ash tree removals, this is a $500,000 item. I think everybody will remember. We talked about this. This is a response to not having sufficient staffing at forestry, and they use this funding to remove trees for the emerald ash borer within the public right of way to alleviate liability for the city. And we have done that for multiple years, so this is not a new item. Excuse me, as we move down into road and bridge project fuel tax, these projects, and I'll walk through each one of them, are a culmination of grant projects. They are also a culmination of that ordinance that I mentioned for the Complete Streets Advisory Committee. And so the first project there is River to Pear Boulevard reconstruction for $1.5 million. Refresh everybody's memory, 2.4 miles of roadway reconstruction between Gravois and Lansdowne, geometric changes, safety enhancements, median construction, multimodal improvements, guardrail installation. This is an East-West Gateway grant project. That is the fund that we need for this year. And it is also a Complete Street Advisory Committee recommendation. Traffic management enhancements phase number 9. Let me get to this one. That is East-West Gateway grant project. That is also a recommendation from the Complete Streets Advisory Committee. Traffic signal replacement on McCausland, Canterbury to Etzel. That is a, $1 million ask. That's what's needed for this year. That's traffic signal replacement, signal interconnect, approximately 20 traffic signals, ADA curb ramp improvements, and sidewalk improvements north of Delmar. The next one is Christie Boulevard Cycle Track. That is a request from the Complete Streets Committee, and that is also an East-West Gateway grant project as well. The ask there is for this year is $500,000, 1.2 miles of sidewalk level greenway extension, roadway narrowing, safety enhancements, multi-use bike and pedestrian facilities, as well as new pavement. The next project is Lindell Multimodal Improvements. That is also an East-West Gateway grant project. That is also a Citizen Advisory Complete Streets Advisory project request. That is 1.3 miles of two-way cycle track from Kings Highway to Vanaventer, a road diet, bus boarding islands, ADA improvements, and new pavement markings. And again, that request is $100,000 for this year. The next project on the
I'll
list.
update that description there. I see there's just an error. Copy that. So
Yeah, and by the way, all these descriptions are on the city's budget website. These were all provided as part of the Citizen Advisory Committee. These are all, I'm taking them directly off the presentation, Paul.
got it.
The next is Kings Highway traffic signal improvements, and that is phase 10, and that is Kings Highway McCree to Schollmeyer. The ask on that project is $300,000. That is traffic signal replacement and signal interconnect. That's approximately 17 traffic signal replacements. And again, East-West Gateway project and Complete Streets Advisory Committee request. The next project on the list is bicycle facility improvements. And that one is not a complete streets ask, but excuse me, it's a complete streets ask, but not a Great East-West Gateway grant project. It is locally funded. And that project description is restriping existing bike lanes, newer replacement durable thermoplastic bike lane symbols, thermoplastic sharrows, updates on city installed bike facilities, which may only have conventional paint markings, added stock of necessary features for certain bike elements such as zebra delineators and flexible posts. The project may also include spot upgrades where feasible, such as enhanced crosswalks markings or green pavement markings for bicycles. Now, the ask for that project was actually $1 million. The funding on that one didn't match up for $1 million, so I plugged in $250,000 as a phased project and looked at it that we could work through that $1 million over a course of 4 years or so and still accomplish what it is. And there's no real limits to the project. There's no grant governing it, so it would be an ideal project to phase. The next project on the list is miscellaneous street and bridge repairs. Just like the building repairs above, there are things that happen to our street and our bridges, 74 bridges across the city, that neither BPS nor the street department has budget for in their budget. And so this item works very, very well to do repairs. We are using $500,000 right now to do karst topography street repair on 3108 Potomac that has been there for many, many years. And so these type of things come forward, and we need to have some discretionary funding to address those. Back when I first started in this position, that discretionary funding was upwards of $1 million to $1.5 million annually. We've been able to repair a number of things that had problems over the years. So you'll see that I have a very modest ask of $300,000 for that item. Compton Bridge over Mill Creek. This is an East-West Gateway grant project. I'm happy to inform everybody that we now have all of our documentation in place received, and we are able to put this project out to bid hopefully here in the next week or so at the end of this month, and be able to bid this project relatively quickly. This is the complete reconstruction of the Compton Bridge and approach pavement from Shoto to Spruce. It's a 4-lane configuration with a wide protected multi-use path on the east side of the bridge. Had an extended timeline to secure state of Missouri property for construction, which again we now have. We have a federal grant for it. The federal grant tops out at $17 million, as you'll see on your needs inventory. And so therefore, we need some additional match share funding to build this project. Now, we'll take the bids. We'll see where the bids come in. We believe that it's going to be a little bit north of what we're asking for here. But again, I plugged in 2.850 as close to 3 million as I could get and be within this road and bridge fuel tax funding. If we move on down to the next one, the ADA transition plan, that is not a grant project, but it is a complete street ask. And so get to that description. So, yeah. ADA improvements to the city facilities, buildings, programs, parks, bus stops, and transportation amenities. Sidewalk work is prioritized by the ADA transition plan. Sidewalk work is generally outside of other projects. So when we do other projects such as our federal grant projects and so forth, that includes all the sidewalk work, ramps, and ADA improvements. This is outside of that. This is standalone issues that come forward. The Complete Streets Advisory Committee asked for a $3 million ask. Again, with the available funding, I was able to work in an ask of about 750,000. This is again one of these projects. If you look on your 5-year history, you'll see that we have funded upwards of $6 million over the past number of years for AD improvements. There's a lot to go. And as long as we continue to fund this as we go along, we should be fine to stay off the radar of the United States Department of Justice and issues related to the ADA Accessibility Act. And again, working closely with David Newberger and my staff to continue doing ADA accessible items throughout the city. As we step on down
Hey,
to
Ben, you got a question? on
Hey,
that?
Rich, you may have said it, but can you confirm, does it include some of our city buildings that so many
Yes.
people access?
Yes, it includes sidewalks, everything within the city, including accessibility to programs. So whatever that would mean to get someone to a program, even if it took an elevator or something like that, it could be included in the ADA transition plan.
Do you know where City Hall stands on that? I mean, we watch it every day with people struggling to get up.
Oh, yeah, well, we haven't disabled entrance, which is the north tunnel. We are upgrading the remainder of the bathrooms within City Hall to meet ADA requirements. We are working on a plan to put an ADA entrance at the south parking lot, but it has been extremely challenging, and so we've never really came to a part where everyone is happy with it because it takes up a lot of the doorway on the parking lot. And so we're working towards it. I mean, we're relatively compliant, but I think we could always be better.
Okay, I just learned something here too. So if you have mobility issues, you can come through the tunnel entrance. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, the north tunnel entrance to the basement, to the elevator, and upstairs. And currently, the restroom that's adjacent to the elevator in the basement is ADA accessible.
Okay. Yeah, for a separate time, I'd like to get some feedback on how often that's utilized. It seems like I see so many people struggling in through the front door, but maybe there's twice that many coming through the tunnel.
It's awfully difficult to tell people you have to go all the way around to the back of the building to get in. And
Yeah,
again, that's why we continue to look at the south entrance where the parking lot is, because that would make the most sense if someone is coming to City Hall.
right. Okay, great. Thanks for the feedback on that.
Sure. All right. The next we will talk about parks. And so parks had a substantial number of needs. First of all, Soulard Market was on top of their list. I have Soulard Market. They had asked for $2.5 million. Again, we have spent money on Soulard Market over the past number of years. Looking for the numbers we speak here. But we have invested substantial amount of money in pieces. Soulard Market, we have put about 5.7 million into it previously. So again, this falls within that same idea of continuing to fund the program, knock off projects as we go, $275,000. Same thing goes with the item above it with the pool renovation project previous to now with rec center pools. We have put in approximately, looks like $3.5 million from different funding sources. And so this continues that methodology of putting in a couple 100,000. Parks was looking for an additional 2.5 million. We just keep working towards that until we get those projects completed. I'll do 1415 North 13th Street first, and then we'll come back to Lyle House. So 1415 North 13th Street, there are heaters. That is the Mangelsdorf building where forestry resides in the garage. All 4 heaters are out. I worked in a couple $100,000 to repair a couple of the heaters. And then my thought would be is I could work with my facility staff through some budget funding and maybe miscellaneous building repairs and pick up the other 2 funds or the other 2 heaters outside of this fund so we could stretch the funds farther. And then, of course, the Lau House, the ask there was about $3 million. Just to give a little history on that so everybody knows. It is the oldest frame structure in the city of St. Louis. It is in Cronolette Park on the south side. Been working on the project since about 21, 22 to do renovations to the actual building, along with the Cronolette Park Advisory Board, the Parks Department, Alderwoman Schweitzer, and unfortunately, within about the past year or so, there was a fire there happened. It was an accidental type thing. It was deemed not to be arson, accidental. It did significant damage to the structure. The structure today is boarded up and has a chain link fence around it. The estimated cost to come in and repair that structure is about $3 million. And so, again, with there are some additional funding that the Parks Department had put within their budget. I think it was somewhere on the order of a couple $150,000. I know Alderwoman Schweitzer talked about the Cronolette Park Advisory Board having some funding, a possible grant from a foundation, as well as some possible work capital. So, what I really wanted to do, even though this rated so far down on the survey, is to show that the city had some interest in this along with the Parks Department and put something in the capital budget to try to help get this to a point where it could actually be renovated. Now, I am going to say that, along with the other funding that I talked about and the possibilities, which there are definite possibilities to do this, you know, I would be very careful about spending any of this funding until we have a clear path forward, whether that be, you know, what the program is for the building, whether that's what the funding is going to be, or so forth. We certainly wouldn't want to get into a situation where, the Alderwoman, the Parks Department, the Capital Committee, a grant, we spent money on it, and we couldn't finish what it is that we have started here. What this project does that I am aware of, and Alderwoman Schweitzer can probably comment on much further than me, is that it would repair the structure and it would bring it back to a state beyond where it was, white boxed out on the inside with new systems, and then have an opportunity to be used for some type of a future program. So I'm going to stop and ask the Alderwoman, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate that summary and for it even being on the list at all. It is one of the banes of my existence, I'll put it that way, the Lyle House. And I think my entire neighborhood and community feels the way. I know a few Ward 1 residents on this committee feel my pain with it. For years, we have been getting our ducks in a row. It had no plans for the building. I know the BPS team and some consultants worked to build out, the where does the electrical run? How does the plumbing in this building work? Where does it go? It's a really old building and a lot of that just wasn't known. So once that information was in hand, it was less than 5 months later that the building caught fire and is now in the current condition it's in. So we got to a really close point to making it a building that could be used. And then this happened and it really set us back, really hurt morale, I think, as well, around the renovation work in the community. So we have a grant application out, the Friends of Cronolette Park do, with the True Last Foundation, which has done significant work in other parks and other historic buildings around the city of St. Louis and restoration. Certainly this building isn't as far gone as buildings that have been restored to productive use, but it is in really, truly terrible shape. So, hundreds of thousands of dollars has been put into this building in the last 10 years, and it's in the shape that it is now. So I think we're all in that place where, unless there's significant private investment, the city isn't going to have the funds that it needs to do it on its own, regardless of what capital fund it comes from, with how much the need is and how great the needs are on other projects. So, um, you know, right now, with this 250,000, if this goes through, $250,000 from the Condolet Park capital funds that exist for that park. I have 100,000 of Ward Capital that I'm so grateful is available because South Broadway is getting done through some ARPA funds, so money I'd saved could be used for something else, which is great. And then a $250,000 for year one ask to TrueLask, which is about a little bit less than a third of the project identified. If all of those funds go through, you know, obviously the amount of work that needs to happen won't happen in 1 year. So like so many other projects that Rich talked about, it would be probably a multi-year project to get it to productive use. But unless it has a roof that goes on it and unless it becomes watertight, we might as well just spend the money to demolish it. So that's where we're at. And I know that's, I don't say any of that lightly because it's been years of trying to get it moving and just where it is now. So, um, yeah, if anyone out there is listening and has millions of dollars and loves historic buildings, now is your time to speak up for the Lyle House. So, thanks for giving me that time, Rich, to talk a little bit about where we're at.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for your description.
Yeah,
So,
and I'll add that too. And thank you, Alderwoman. I know that's been a sort of a conundrum over the last couple of years, and I think since there is no disposition, particularly about what happens to how these funds go, which direction, I think it was just important that one way or another it needs to be addressed, and we do have some funding here to take whichever path it needs to go. And so that I think that's important. So because one way or the other is going to have to be some solution. Ben, you got your hand raised.
I appreciate the discussion as well. I think the challenge that we're in as a city, and this is, I don't think new, but just to reflect, at least for the mayor's office, kind of how we're thinking about this particular point in our fiscal landscape and the dynamics that we find ourselves in. Making hard choices is going to be what we have to do. Obviously, Alderwoman Schweitzer's been championing the decaying infrastructure in the water division and our municipal utility. We are in a massive budget gap right now, kind of across the departments. And I think we should be very careful about also, as much as we love some of these historic facilities, if there is no path that has at least grant money on the table, I think it would be difficult to justify using those resources for something that has, when we're not funding critical infrastructure. So I just wanted to say, I think we have to take that as, these are hard choices to make, but putting even $250,000 against something that probably doesn't have a path, it seems like we could be putting good money after bad. But that is, I think that's something we have to be willing to say no to if we don't have a real feasible path forward.
so the one thing I'll just mention about that, Ben, and that's all noted, is that even if we decide not to move forward with the project and we, decide to demo the project, we still have to fund that demo from somewhere and the restoration of the land. So, we have to consider that somewhere along the line. The thing is, a liability sitting there today. The fence has been breached at least once or twice that I'm aware of. And I think the last thing we would want is somebody to get into this building and get hurt and sue the city for way more than what it's worth here. So, just food for thought. We'd have to put some money towards demo if that is determined to be the path.
Okay, so just to clarify, that 250,000 could be renovations or demo. Is that right? Or
Yes.
to specify it that way in this committee? Or
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Yes, it could be.
I think it would be helpful just to give ourselves more flexibility to do what you identified and even what Alderman Schweitzer said. So that line item, we wouldn't want someone to say later, like, no, that was designated for renovations and you're using it for demolition. And I don't know, make a accusation that we're acting in bad faith.
I mean, I think we could denote on there, it could be renovation slash demolition so that it gives us the wiggle room to whatever's decided to do.
Thanks.
Alderman Schweitzer, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, thank you. And I will note that with the True Last Foundation application that's in, we made it very clear in that application that them coming in now is, they had interest in their initial response to us, saying, they wanted to fund when the building is ready to be kind of white boxed and when it's back to its, premier use and everything. And we had to respond to them, if you all don't come in now, it's very likely that we won't be able to save this building because without this kind of private fund now, the city is just not in the position to put in hundreds of millions of dollars without that private assistance. There are other funders, other private funders that are interested in this sort of work. And so Friends of Carondelet Park is working really hard to try to identify more folks. And one of the things that I think is just something I'd like to flag is when I asked, no buildings in Carondelet Park are insured. And that is scary when you think about our boathouse, our pavilions, our bathrooms, you know, the Carondelet Recplex thankfully is insured, but the rest of them are not. So, we've had fires in some of the pavilions, and what happens if that catches on fire? We're just demoing every city building, because we don't have them insured. And I think that is something that is really tough because we have put so much money into the Lyle House over the last 10 years, hundreds of thousands of dollars with window replacement, with different work that's happened, with the plan to get it to the point where we could actually do the repair, do renovations, and then it's all sunk cost at this point, because we can't recoup it. We don't. They're not insured. I know we're self-insured as a city, so how does that work with all of this? It's just something that I think is potentially a bigger problem down the line as well.
I can address a little bit about the insurance. Yeah, I think that's a bit of a cost. Most of the buildings that we do have insured are the ones that have debt service out at Sandy on them. You're required to have insurance. But otherwise, it's if the city incurs damages, we're pay as you go. So and that's I mean, you could go in a different direction with that, but then again, you'd have less on an operations side, given that you're going to be paying excessive premiums for the insurance itself. So, it's a trade-off. I mean, and it's just one of those things that you have to consider when doing these things. I mean, if you did have insurance premiums, you'd have less money for capital on the parks. So, again, it's one of those things you review and have to debate when you're allocating a limited amount of resources.
Okay, so I will move on to public safety. Under public safety, the fire department had a list of about $6.2 million in vehicles that they were looking for. The most important on the list was some command vehicles and then ambulances. The ambulances are one of the most vehicles that have issues. Josh is also on the call here. We will buy 4 of them, but 2 of them are being bought from general obligation bonds, or excuse me, 2026 capital funds. And then the rest of the vehicles that they were looking for, other than one 100-foot platform trucker proposed to be over in the GOB. So you'll see that I covered them over there. And then the other issue that is on here is the EMS headquarters roof replacement on Hampton at Watson. We performed a number of roof replacements under ARPA funding. We're still wrapping those up. As a matter of fact, we don't have sufficient funding to do the EMS roof replacement. That's a $500,000 ask. I got it in at 455. Again, that's another one that if the bids come in correctly, I won't need to do this, but if they come in high, I can always supplement with that miscellaneous discretionary building funds. The roof over there is in horrid shape. It leaks, a lot of water, air quality issues inside the building. So that is a major priority. So at this point, that is what we have for fire. The public safety answering point, PSAP, located Jefferson and Cass behind the fire department headquarters, is well underway of construction and has well over about $43 million in funding currently. We are about $12 million short for purchasing the radios, the technology, the furnishings, fixtures, and equipment, and some exterior work to the building. Excuse me. And so to fit within this envelope, I asked for $1.5 million. And then you'll note that on the GOB side, I also asked for about $3 million on that side as well. If you move on down to municipal buildings, the first item is medical examiner security upgrades. That building is a 24/7, 365 facility. Someone is always in that building. This is for door security, lighting, cameras, and so forth. Because again, there's always at least one person in that building, and so we need to protect that building and our employees that are in there. The next item is communication division replacement of air handling unit, AHU, condensing unit controls for $150,000. This is the communications building on Oakland Avenue. Used to be the old fire alarm bunker. This is an original unit to that building. We have carried it well beyond its useful life, and so this needs to be replaced for the communications division. Keeps their building cool, air conditioned in the summertime. The next item on the list is the Gateway Transportation Center repairs to train platforms A and B, $155,000. This is a safety related project to repair the Amtrak passenger walkways and platforms. The project is also repairs federally mandated safety tiles along the edges of the platform. So it is a federal requirement to do this, and that is $155,000 to do that project. The next item is South Refuse, miscellaneous building repairs adjacent to the transfer station and the South Incinerator is a garage building where approximately 40 employees report daily. The bulk dumpster operation is also within that building. The roof leaks. The electrical is in very poor condition. The locker rooms, the offices, the break room, everything there is in very, very, very poor condition. And also, the heating in that building generally does not work. And so, the original ask for that building, I believe, was $600,000. In order to phase an approach here, I asked that we put $200,000 in the program, and we can phase repairing this garage just like we have a number of the other things above. The tow lot relocation. The tow lot is currently on Hall Street. It is in a very small facility. The actual building was damaged by a tornado, not the tornado that damaged North City, but the summer before that actually lifted the roof up and set it back down on the building. The building is in very, very bad condition. The tow lot gets broken into regularly. There's no way to secure that. So what this 150,000 stands for is a design to start a design to move that facility to the old MSI site up on Hall Street. As you all probably know, MSI was torn down. The site is vacant today. nothing there. There's about 30 acres of open ground. Not necessarily that the toll lot would take all 30 acres, but it could be moved to that location, fenced in, and have, facilities that are appropriate for our employees to be in.
Hey, Rich, yeah, I'm glad you described that because I was a little confused about what that was. It was a small dollar amount and I didn't know. So in terms of describing it for our exhibits, it should say tool lot relocation, what design or plans and design or what?
Yeah, I think that would probably be a good way to put that. It just
Okay.
has been mentioned before. Maybe we disclaimer that so somebody doesn't think we're going to move it because the estimated amount right now is about $6 million. It could be less than that. We don't know. We really need to get into a layout. We need to see what we have, what we can move and use, and so forth. So yeah,
Okay.
that'd be a good idea. We could call
Okay.
it full
All right.
lot design. Great.
And Ben, I
Um,
see your hands up. Go ahead, Ben.
Rich, I really appreciate you including it, based on the conversations we've had with Director Jackson and obviously the tow lot and our capacity, the whole operation is a big priority for the mayor to address just based on some of the challenges we have with vehicles around the city. So on a time horizon, if we don't have any additional money allocated toward it, does that mean nothing would happen till FY28 other than design?
I think it's going to take some time to do a layout. I think it's going to take probably a matter of 6 months or so to get a program put together. I suppose you could put something into the GOB there or any other funding source that would fall behind that. But I think what I'm just trying to get here is get the ball rolling a little bit. And I think, yeah, I would agree if there's no other funding sources available, no appetite to put it into the bond or any other funds, then it would have to wait until this time next year. That's correct.
Okay, could we consider it then for a geo bond?
Absolutely.
I think, yeah. Okay, I'll pause there.
Well, the only concern I would have on that is that you got to have, particularly when the GOB, you need to have it fleshed out a little bit in terms of what dollar amount you're going to have. I don't know necessarily whether it's been fleshed out where it needs to be. So, but with that caveat, I would, sure. And Jim, I see your hands raised.
Yes, thank you. I guess this project, Comptroller's office was made aware of it probably 90 days ago, but it was never, I guess, discussed to this point where it has mushroomed into a $6 million project. We've not been part of any discussion on this, especially if we're going to be putting this out as part of a bond issue. I just think there's a lot to talk about in terms of return on investment and that sort of thing. Although we certainly support the concept of getting more cars off the street and generating more revenue, we would just like to be part of any future discussions on this particular item, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just another comment on this one, Rich. So can you, from our, to Jim's point here, we obviously you had some discussions with the streets department about obtaining, looking at other options to try to enhance their capacity, with other things, potentially purchasing something. This was definitely the less expensive way to gain additional capacity. I think we still don't really have the full cost figured out, but we do think this is significantly less expensive than other options. So happy to have maybe like a small working group on that. I guess my point here is I don't want to find ourselves in a situation where, okay, we like MSI, we do the design, it looks like we could pretty quickly move and at least start to gain some of that capacity that we need for getting more cars off the streets. But then, there's no capital to put against it. So I don't know if there's some middle ground here where we can at least have a small amount to start a project with beyond just the 150,000 for design over.
Well, the other question I had on this specifically is that we are contemplating putting money into the repair facility for dumpsters and the building under which Rich described down at South Refuse. I believe that sooner or later SLDC is going to put together a plan that's going to use that entire facility to create a south terminal similar to what we have at the North Dock. And what I'm getting to, Ben, is we have to have a home for those people as well. And it was always discussed that MSI, they used to do it up there before. And maybe this could be a combination tow lot facility and a place where this dumpster repair area could be. And again, it's not for this discussion, but I guess we have to be cognizant that 30-something acres up there could be possibly utilized for more than one thing.
It makes sense to me. Again, I worry about getting pushing off any expansion to FY28. Anyway, it seems like a 1 year. I know design does take some time, Rich, but at the same time, is there a way to preserve some flexibility that if we were able to get through and start something sooner to at least gain some capacity there, that we could? Is there a mechanism to do that? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I hear you. I think there has to be some design done. I think the challenge I had with the funding for capital is there just isn't a lot there to do something there. Now, if the appetite is to, get it quicker sooner than later, we look over at the GOB and figure out what would the priority be over what. There's a little bit more room there to play with. I mean, I think at the end of the day, yeah, we could get some fencing up and get a lot in place and start doing some pieces to it. It just, I would hope it's cheaper than 6 million. We own the land, but there's until I get into the design, I really hate to say that's where it would be. But yeah, I think we could, if it's a big priority, then we look at the GOB and see where it can fit.
And to your point, Rich, construction trailers, fencing, porta potties, to get it started, to meet what Ben's looking to do, we could do that for us. I would think a limited time while we're working through the rest and still benefit from the revenue derived from having that up there in a larger footprint.
Well, right. And the other thing is I hate to give the employees the worst place to be in than where they are today. I would really like to give them an upgraded facility. They've lived in that for a long time. So, yeah, we just need to look at it and see if we can get something moved along. I mean, theoretically, you would think it's a fenced area with rock, but you have fencing, you have lighting, you have all the MEP, you have all the sewer work and electrical that is not there. So there's a lot of utility work that'll have to be done because that was all abandoned when MSI was removed.
Right.
So yes, we'll look at it.
okay, so does that mean we could put some kind of small amount against it in the geo bond? Or does that mean we use what's already there?
Well, I think it would mean that and again, we haven't talked about the GO bond yet, but it would mean that on this list that Rich has advised for the GO, something else would have to go out, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think we're thinking the geo bond is around, maybe 21, $22 million. So when you look at the list, I would say that's kind of what I have from the Citizen Advisory Committee, what I have from everything else. So you would come in there and say, okay, well, we want to put 2 million or 2.5 million towards the tow lot. So what are we going to knock out of here in order to do that? And that's where the discussion would be.
Okay, I'll stand by and let you get through any other pieces before we get up there.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Let's go to the next one on the list, which is Circuit Courts Building, Civil Courts Building facade repairs. This is a multiple year program for many, many millions of dollars. What this $600,000 represents is it completes phase 1B of the project, which are critical face panel repairs to keep the face panels from shifting and falling off the building. We've already done about 850,000 in repairs to that building. This completes phase 1 of that work. And then courtroom modernization. The courts asked for about $1 million to do that. You'll see I pencil in about 600,000. That coupled with the discretionary fund up at the beginning of the conversation would give them their million plus a couple $150,000 of other discretionary funds. And Paul, I don't know if you want to make any comments about, courts and where we should be with that.
Yeah, if you recall last year, the courts gave us a rather significant bill on capital. We are able to accommodate most of it. This also addresses most, though not all. So basically, we're trying to piece together both from the operating budget, the capital budget, and the GO, so that we don't get in a bind with the courts in terms of how we fund this, because they can come back and say, oh well, we insist that you fund this, and then our options are off the table. So we're trying to be as accommodating as we can with the sources that we've got, and that's what this does. So we're sort of in the middle of trying to accommodate as much as we can, and we'll see if this works, basically.
Okay. You want to go? All right. And then the next item would be circuit attorney. Item very similar to what we talked about. The medical examiner's office is, door codes, cameras, security items for the circuit attorney's office. And then we moved down to information technology. There were a couple items there that were asked for. The first one was switch network recapitalization. And so that one is poor user experience, vulnerability of network due to manufacturer no longer supporting devices, degraded network performance, and increased likelihood of major network outages around the city. And so that ask was originally for $100,000. Again, they had some other funding from a previous source. I arbitrarily penciled in $50,000, giving them an opportunity to, get that project started, and we would be able to phase that like we did other projects. Anybody that works around City Hall, which you all do, that, the computer networks seem to have a lot of issues. So I think we need to do that project. And then the next one is Cisco core switch replacement. And the core switch is the main network communication hub for all city government offices. Replacing the core switch will allow us to stay current with the secure switch technology and have equipment that has service and maintenance included. The original ask for that was $400,000. Again, this will be a phased project. Put in $100,000 for the first year per the request of ITSA, and that will get them started in that project as well. Did you want to talk about the 2020, the GOB projects, or do you just want to talk about?
Yeah, let's. I do want to do one sidetrack and talk about lease purchase for a moment.
Okay.
And Rich has basically described most of what we're doing for the regular sources. And over the years, at least recent years, with ARPA and some of the surplus monies, we've been able to cash purchase a lot of our fleet replacements. Now, a lot of that now is ending, our ability to just cash purchase there. And previously, what we did was enter short-term lease agreements, which allowed us to purchase and replace many of our fleet equipment, much of our fleet equipment. And Jim, you're familiar with this. I can't believe the duration. It was either a 7 or 10-year lease purchase agreement that we used to do. And then we let them sort of expire and we sort of stair step them over time. So what this scenario entails is that we'd allocate $3.5 million out of what we have in our fleet purchases to a new lease purchase. I don't know exactly, Jim, if we could get the numbers for what that would get us. I don't know if that's somewhere north of or close to 18 million or so, depending on what the interest rates are. And then we could get a list of what the priority replacements would be from ESD based on that we're able to purchase. Now, I know we prioritize that, as Rich does, between refuse and everything else, similar to what we do with the Citizens Advisory Committee, because refuse is such a high priority. But we want to be able to get that on a regular schedule so that we can replace what is most needed on that critical list without but accommodating that with what we have available. And obviously when we do a lease purchase, that duration, the maturity of those that lease cannot exceed the useful life of the equipment, and that's sort of our requirement. So I don't know, Jim, do you have any thoughts on or who we dealt with before? We do have authorization in the board bill and the budget bill to do that, and I forget who it was that we did those leases with, but that would be the plan.
Well, I think first of all, the concept is great, and we've gotten good results from it. We would have to go back and kind of do a little survey, a minor little RFP, if you will, and have some banks shoot us some rates and what they would allow us to do. In the past, again, we've gotten the 10-year money on trash trucks because we can get them to go longer than that, of course, and we would stagger. We'd have to look at the rest of the list that make up that 2 million piece, and there's some that are 5-year useful life vehicles, and some are 7. But you're right, we have to go through and subject to what the bank will allow us to do. But more importantly, I want to couch all this with Mackenzie and I have only briefly discussed both the capital budget, the GO that you've given us, and the concept of a lease purchase. And so we would look to her for further direction. But the concepts, Paul, is exactly as you stated.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. And so basically, just for everyone's benefit, we do have that $3.5 million there, contemplating that in some way, shape, or form we would do a lease purchase to just to supplement our vehicle purchases, and that would be the way we would sort of extend our purchases in the next few years, utilizing that route. Okay, and we do have, I would like to go over the GO, given that, because obviously as we talk about what other things we may be able to fund, and I know, Ben, you're interested in towing, so everyone should get an idea about what we have available, what potential projects could be charged against it. And now with the GO, as I mentioned, that's issuing debt. And so when you issue debt, you have to make sure the maturity of the project or the useful life of the project doesn't exceed the maturity of the bonds. And so that's one of the requirements, and we have to be specific. Yeah, Rich, I'd appreciate it if you just go through that on briefly, just to allow what it is that we would be considering if we do this GO later. This would be after, I assume, Jim, this is after the budget. It would be sometime later this year, summer perhaps.
Yeah.
We'd be issuing.
What we've got to do is I have not talked to anybody over in our general accounting area as to when by which we have to do this to ensure that the levy stays the same. Okay. That'll guide us.
Okay, very good. All right, Rachel, I'll just leave it to you and just to briefly go through the listing, the proposed listing here. And so,
yep. So I'll start at the top of the list. So I had an item for BPS building repairs, which is a discretionary fund. But as Paul reminded me that in a GO, you have to identify all the items that you're using it for. And so, Ben, this might be an item here where we could put the toll lot for this item and it would have $1 million in, and maybe that gives us a start into, some of the infrastructure around that building. Just food for thought to think about.
Yeah, I think that would make sense to me, but do you have to necessarily remove 1 million from something else though?
Well, it's like I said, BPS building repairs, which is a discretionary fund, which, as I said, Paul reminded me I can't actually do that. So I would have to identify a number of building repairs. And quite frankly, I can't identify them because I use that fund when they pop up. So again, I think, hearing you loud and clear and knowing what the mayor's directive is, that might be a good one to put in its place.
I mean, I
Okay.
think it's a great way to do it.
The next one down is under street department. We have underground downtown lighting vaults. Just talk about that just a little bit. These are 11 concrete vaults throughout the city. The original, what's in them is the electricity and the regulators that run the capacitors that run the street lights downtown. They are leaking. They're bad. We have put money into these before. I believe we put 500,000 into them previously. The ask was 1 million, so this would get us to 750, and we'd be almost complete with that one. The downtown, signal timing detection, that is in the pavement, that is the loops and pucks that the signals that do not have cameras on, so it actuates the signals when a vehicle approaches it. Again, this is one we have funded before, I believe, and I'm not seeing it really quick here off the top of my head, but looks like we put in, I believe we put in 250,000 previously. This would get us the next step on this project here towards their total ask, which I believe was $1 million. The bridges Columbia and Southwest. This is similar situation to Compton Avenue. This is combining two bridges into one on Southwest Avenue on the south side. Right now, we're in a discussion with the courts for a temporary construction easement for one of the properties. We should be bidding this property in May, or excuse me, this project in May. And so, once this eminent domain of this temporary construction easement is resolved, and so the project had a cap on it. We think it's about going to need about an additional $1 million for the local match here in order to build that project. The ADA transition plan, as I talked about before, Complete Streets Committee recommendation. They asked for 3 million. I put 750 on the other side. This is just continuing that program with $1 million. All the streets, buildings, programs throughout the city continue to make all of our programs accessible. Under Parks Department, these were all their asks on their list. Bear Brothers Park Comfort Station, remove and replace it. It's condemned, 1.7 million. O'Fallon Park YMCA parking lot repairs. The parking lot up there goes into rain gardens and is all breaking off and falling into the rain gardens. There are a lot of holes and issues with that parking lot. It needs to be resurfaced for about $750,000. Clifton Heights Park Comfort Station roof and deck replacement. That actually is a replacement of the comfort station itself. That building is as well condemned and needs to be removed and replaced. It's currently closed. Replace and remove and repair, place glass block, exterior wall, Will Rec Center. This is the glass block on the exterior of the building. The glass block is bowing out and is going to fail at some point in time. It's a structural issue. We believe it's a foundation issue, but again, we have to get into a full design, probably some geotechnical investigations, some destructive testing, and we estimate that at about 1.2 million because there's a lot of glass block there. Hazardous tree removal, this is an item, and Paul, you can tell me whether or not we have budgeted for this in the budget for the Parks Department, but this is again staff shortage, and Alan and Greg came in and asked for additional resources for hazardous tree removal, whether it be within the right of way outside the Emerald Ash Borer or within city parks.
Yeah, that's a separate item from the ash borer. The ash borer is the one we've been recurring, and this is a supplemental to that.
Supplemental to everything but the ash tree, correct?
Right, that's correct.
All right.
I don't wanna sound like cold water, but I'm not sure that that is something that we can bond. It's not a capital project per se.
Okay.
Duly noted.
Okay.
Under public safety, this is the list of the vehicles that the fire turned in, other than the ambulances, 8 Command Tahoes, all-wheel drive, 616,000, 2 15-passenger vans, 120,000, one 77-foot Quint, which is a small ladder truck, 2.2 million, a heavy-duty dump truck with plow and salt truck. That's what they use in the wintertime for their headquarters, their other facilities, and their fire stations to remove snow. And then one shop truck at $100,000. And all those, again, are beyond their useful life and need to be updated and replaced. Then we have installation of fencing and parking lots at 4 engine houses, 23, 28, 31, and 19 for about 280,000. That's requested because the lots are not secure. The firemen go out on calls and their personal vehicles are broken into. All the other fire stations have at least 8-foot chain link fence around them that's lockable and secures their vehicles. Replace carpet with vinyl tile on fire stations for 250. This is on the second floor in the bunk quarters. Remove all the carpet squares, carpet tiles that are there that are stained and dirty and moldy and everything else they are, and put in a heavy duty vinyl tile that can be mopped and maintained by the firemen. And then fire station driveway aprons. This is the lead into the fire station from the actual street apron. Many of them are broken and cracked and so forth. And so where I have problems fixing those with them is I cannot use street funding to fix them. I can't use St. Louis Works funding to fix them. So it really is a building maintenance fund. And as you see, $500,000 is a lot of funding to replace these. So I need to have a standalone item, but they are broken and they do damage millions of dollars worth of trucks when they kick up. So we're due for replacement on quite a few of those. Public safety answering point, we talked about that before.
Hey, Rich, can I just interject one thing?
Sure, Jim.
And Paul, you can weigh in on this as well. There's some things in that public safety list that might fit nicely into a lease purchase, into that rolling stock lease purchase. Certainly, your discretion, but there's some things in there that would fit nicely there that perhaps could free up money for other things you might want to do capital project wise.
Duly noted. I think, that's all going to be determined on what, you think the lease purchase amount could be. And then we can talk about what could or might move around and make sense to do that. But yeah, thank you for that, Jim.
Surely.
All right. Public safety answering point 3 million. That's in addition to the 1.5 million, 1.3 million. I had 1.5 on the other side. Again, that gets us to 4.5 million of the 12 million remaining. And then, the question was asked, well, where would the remaining funds come from? We still have public safety Eco Devo funds that fund about 1.8, 1.9. So that will get us yet a little closer. We would probably be within about $4.5, $5 million of having all the funding for the PSAP facility, which is currently being built, actually.
And just another note on that one. We'll probably need to get a little more specific into what that would mean. Is it equipment? Is it brick and mortar? We would have to be a little more specific for bond council purposes.
$6 million for Motorola radios, $3 million for the rest of the technology in the building and FF&E, and then about $3 million to finish the exterior of the construction.
Okay, well, just pick one that would have a useful life equal to the length of the bonds that we'll sell.
Right.
So, any of it would work, but that would be perfect as the description rather than that general category.
Sounds good.
Okay.
And then finally, City Hall roof repairs. We estimate the roof repairs on City Hall, the whole roof probably needs to be replaced. There are multiple roofs on here. Most of it is slate and it needs to be replaced, although you're probably talking about $20 million to replace that. We were looking at $3 million and we would start replacing sections of it. 3 million still a lot of funding to do that. So again, I put in a project of $1 million, figuring we could start on this and fund it as we had available funds to replace that 108 year old slate tile on City Hall. That's leaking, by the way, a lot of places. And then we continue on a little bit here. We have 1520 Market doors and facade repairs. So that description is replace the broken and operable automatic entry egress doors at 1520 Market. The doors have been operable for some time, many years actually. In addition, water's leaked into the facade above the entry, causing considerable deterioration both outside and inside the entry and egress points. The issues have caused considerable accessibility issues, coupled with an appearance issue, which is an embarrassment to the city for any visitors in this building. And then the municipal garage repair project, preserving a revenue generating historic city building used by hundreds of public employees, stopping water from entering the parking garage and further deteriorating the concrete in the parking decks in the garage and stopping the occasional concrete chunks from delaminating and falling on personally owned vehicles. And then we have the civil courts building and facade repairs. So that one for 4.5 million, part of the program I talked about before. What that 4.5 million actually does is, if you look at the top of the building that the Sphinx sit on, it's a green metal roof that is called a Zagorate roof. And that Zagorate roof, to remove and replace it, which it leaks and has a number of issues in it, is 4.5 million. So that would replace the actual green roof on top of the civil courts building in conjunction with all the facade repairs. And then facility court and juvenile detention doors, lock, residential unit, 900,000. Amanda Sadamka talked about that one a little bit. Basically what that does is it takes a non-secure dormitory at the juvenile detention center and retrofits the doors and locks to make it a secure facility so that they can house more juveniles in the building in a secure area, which they're currently short on. And then finally, the Hyper-V server replacement for ITSA. All city network storage, website, and IT services rely on server nodes, quicker server response times, enhance user experience, improve uptime, and Dell warranted maintenance on all devices. If the production stack goes offline, all city IT services will go down, rendering the city IT useless until parts are found, maintenance techs are located. And it says the city maintains a 7-node Hyper-V SAC, and the oldest of these devices is beyond the end of its useful support, requiring third-party warranted services for parts and repair. So that's all the GOB items.
Great, thank you, Rich. Yeah, and Jim, as you mentioned, we have to make sure that those items on the GO are suitable for funding with a GO. So it may be a matter of reviewing both columns, and maybe there's something we can switch from one column to the other and move it back so that it's appropriate based on the funding source, and so we can do that. And there are also, as we mentioned on a couple items, need a little bit more better description on what those are, so that we either whether it's the total relocation, we can just, that's the design, and also what it is what we're doing on the GO, so that those who are reviewing it for suitability to the GO have a little bit more detail into what that's being funded. But that's basically what we're looking at. I know this is a lot of material to go over. but we're going to need to have a budget at coming up shortly. I was not expecting any vote out today, so you can get a sigh of relief from that. But we do need to have a subsequent meeting to actually make some recommendations. So what I was hoping to do is schedule another capital meeting within the next week, perhaps maybe a week from today, if we could, just to make those recommendations so we can get something prepared to go to ENA in April. So we'll be reaching out to you. In the meantime, if there are items that come out or ideas that come up and we want to delve into further those items and flesh them out a little bit more before we have the final meeting, just please let me know and we can do that. Yeah, again, we do need to come to some recommendation again within the next week or so to do this, and so just take all we've got into account, and hopefully we can come up with a package that sort of, I know it's not going to be perfect, but it will address what we can do with what limited resources we've got. So yeah, Ben, go ahead.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Thanks for proposing that. So you're saying next Monday afternoon, is that right?
Yeah, if that works. Michelle's out, but I was looking at the calendar, and that would fit the schedule so that we can get something out by the end of the month. Alderman Schweitzer, you got your hand up?
I just wanted to take the time to thank you all for all this work. It's an incredible amount to put together, and also to the Citizens Advisory Committee who gave so much time as well. I know that they spent a significant amount of time. Monday, March 30th is my birthday, and I will be here if that's the date that we're doing this. And I expect that I get to use one item with no questions from all of you. Just kidding. That's a joke, anyway.
I actually have a conflict that if we're doing the same time on Monday, up just something I think will be hard for me to move. So
okay. Well, I definitely want to either. I mean, we could try Tuesday as well, but we definitely need it within the next week to come up with a meeting time. So we'll be reaching out to get something scheduled so that we can do this. In the meantime, you've got your sort of exhibits. I did also circulate what the exhibits actually look like in the Capitol. Let me pull that one up. Let's see here. Let's see. That's not it. I'll start sharing it. So up on your screen is actually what the Capitol exhibits look like, would look like, going over all the things that we've discussed today, as well as some of the citywide and the parks exhibits, which we'll have to word, and particularly with the Lyle House issue that we talked about earlier. So we can wordsmith all of that, reflect what we discussed today. But just take a look at all of that. I think it's important also with the GO that we do have a recommended list, because when we go back to, let's say, the courts, we've got something to point to. And when they say, hey, where's our projects? We can point to that list, say, here's what we're recommending. It's not going to be part of Board Bill 1, but it is part of the GO that we anticipate going. And I think that's important to show that. So it's something that we're going to have to do. Let me see who am I chatting here. Okay, we'll get the meeting scheduled. Accommodate everyone's schedule. Is there anything? That's all I've got. Is there anything else? Any other outstanding questions on any of the material? Okay, great. Again, thank you for your time, and we'll be seeing you in the next week, and hopefully we'll come up with some recommendation for the committee.
And thank you, Paul and Rich, for all you've done thus far on this. It's, as the Alderwoman said, it's an incredible amount of work.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
You too.